The presenting sponsor for OnEducation is Classcraft. We're excited to announce Classcraft's new story mode, which makes it easy for educators to harness the power of stories. Episodes 1 and 2 of Season 1 are ready for you and your students to play today, and it's completely free. To learn more about Classcraft and the new story mode, simply visit classcraft.com/oneducation.
You know, it's a new skill. We're all learning, friends. We're all learning, and I'm going to learn how to, can it. Welcome to OnEducation, part of the On Podcast Media Network. I'm Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glen Irvin. Friends, we have an awesome pod for you today. We will recap the amazing FETC conference, chat about the interview opportunities we've had recently, and our guest this week is the amazing EdTech blogger, Audrey Watters.
What a week.
It was a fantastic week. I'm still trying to recover, though. Super long days, late evenings, then super long days again, and then travel.
It's funny. Someone asked me today that I work with, how much I have a lot of fun. I was like, yeah, I had a lot of fun. But, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's work. Like, we worked a lot. Like, this conference was busy, and anyone who was there and saw us could see that we were working our butts off pretty hard there. But it was awesome. Such a great time. Got to hang out with all of the fun people that we've hung out with in the past and connect with them and see them all again and have ice cream and it was a really good time. I speaking for me, I really enjoyed myself. It was pretty awesome.
I had never been to Miami, and it's beautiful and warm and so different than Minnesota in January. And
you almost didn't make it home too.
Yeah, it was just crazy weather, but like always. And people were amazing. The people that we got to spend time with, obviously at the conference itself too. Food was phenomenal. Man, I couldn't have asked for more. And we pack it into such a short period of time. I mean, it was 4 days, but my goodness, it was a long 4 days. I mean, we really extended those 4 days out.
And I pinch myself still to think that, we were at a party at an education conference that was hosted or paid for by Epic Games. Mm-hmm. Like, that's something else. Like, that's how far we've come in, like, the games-based learning, video games and education kind of realm that Epic Games is in. It was pretty exciting. That was a pinch myself moment. Like, is this really happening right now? It was pretty cool to experience, and awesome week. We have tons of interviews still to release. We did 13 interviews. They're all going to come out as OnEducation Presents. We've released 4 right now as of recording. The Merrills, who just released a book. Who else? Tom Murray. Mm-hmm. Who else have we released already?
Putting the pressure on me.
A couple others. It's been very, very good. And we have, Monica Burns, Christina Ishmael to come, and so many more. Desiree Alexander, who was absolutely phenomenal. Just such a great week talking to awesome people.
It was awesome too that we had the opportunity to speak to people we've never actually spoke to. I mean, Monica Burns, we've obviously spoke to her in the past and had her on the podcast before. But we had all of these new people that we just had the opportunity to be able to bring them to our audience too. So we're excited to bring them to you and their voices and their passions and what they're doing as far as in education. So that's really an awesome part about these conferences and why they're so important is all of these people are in one place at one time, and we have the ability to be able to reach out to them and then to spend a little bit of time with us so that we can share their voices with you guys. And there was a lot of amazing things. There's some podcasts where I was tearing up That's how good some of these episodes are. So stay tuned for some of those episodes. Make sure you listen to them. There's some fantastic messages and some amazing stories that people are sharing, and just inspiring things. And then some practical things too, as far as being able to connect to resources and those types of things. So a little variety platter of all of those.
Totally. Only as a slight aside, I mean, we know from the numbers that the OnEducation Presents episodes get a little less downloads than the regular, our core 4 1-a-week episodes. Friends, these aren't like conference centric as you may think. Just because we're at FETC doesn't mean that's all we're talking about. In fact, we talk very little about the actual conference. We definitely, these are very core interviews similar to the interviews we do on the regular podcast, talking with inspiring people about what they do and how they do it. It's just that we're lucky that we get to be there when everyone else is also there. So we'd encourage you to go back and listen to the 4 we've released, and stay tuned, because we're going to be releasing them basically one a day or one every other day for the next couple weeks, and we have this episode out. So there's lots to listen to and lots to enjoy and share. We should do, now that FETC is over, and Impact is over, the updates list is a little bit shorter. But it is worth noting that we did make a big announcement just before we left for FETC. We made a big announcement that we are now putting out a bunch more content on YouTube. The Bests, which is the second segment of our regular show, has been video basically recorded for the better part of a month and a half. So we put all those together, and now they are singular kind of episodes on YouTube. And we've also launched a Patreon site, and I wanted to talk just a quick second about that. I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but I did want to draw people's attention to it's patreon.com/OnEducation. And the reason why we did this, we want to sell less ads is really the punchline for all of this. We have slots to sell ads to earn an income. We make money from this so that we can go to FETC. That's literally what we use the money for. And then last year we used it to buy the equipment that we're using there. We're not lining our pockets and certainly not getting rich off of it. What we want to do is be able to go and do live shows and talk to educators at conferences. And that costs money. But we also wanted to put a stronger focus on the content, and that means wanting to sell less ads. So we were hoping that by creating a Patreon site, we could ask our listeners to support us instead of asking for companies to support us. So go check out patreon.com/OnEducation. What we're doing there is releasing basically full video of the episode. So you're watching, if you're watching on Patreon, you're seeing me right now on video because we're recording it on video right now as we speak. And we hope that we got a lot of other kind of benefits and stuff like that too. And I really hope that this resonates with people. FETC, we've talked about, hey, we've been on some podcasts, not as not being the interviewer, but being the interviewee. I just listened to an awesome podcast with you on the P3, the Personal Playlist podcast. I just listened to it this morning, and it was fantastic. It was all Spanish music, man. How was that experience?
It's actually, like I told Noah Daniels, I think is her name, who does this podcast. I said, it's such a fantastic idea. The concept as far as the podcast itself, where you choose 3 songs, basically an inspirational song, a throwback song, kind of represents you, and a kind of I can't remember what the other one was called. But what it forces you to do is like narrow down your choices to these 3 songs that kind of represent who you are. and that's super hard.
Totally,
to do.
Very hard.
I ended up
you used the word intimidating, and I think I actually used the word intimidating too.
I actually would say, I mean, and I had actually other songs in mind too, and I ended up going with 3 songs in Spanish, which I don't know how it's good for the audience or whatever it might be, but it actually was an interesting, just the self-reflection as far as looking at that and kind of this thinking about what actually does fit with who you are, what you've been through, etc., and kind of what pumps you up. So it's a fantastic idea. I was also on this other podcast I actually recorded this past summer, but it just recently came out. They do a bunch of recordings of stuff and then put them out, every so often. And it was for the Central Minnesota Libraries Exchange. And myself and my colleague, her name is Steph, we were interviewed about kind of like what our job is as media specialists and how that's evolved to mean all kinds of other things. And that also, I listened to that today and it came out super fantastic. They did a phenomenal job on the editing and they did a phenomenal job on the sound quality. So very happy to, and humbled by the opportunity to be on those podcasts. And you were on a few too.
Yesterday morning, drinking my coffee, and Mike Matera slides into my DMs. He's like, "Yo, you want to be on my podcast today?" I'm like, sure, yeah, totally. I love Mike Matera, and I would be on Well Played any chance that he asked. So I recorded Well Played with Mike Matera yesterday. So that should be out by the time you're listening to this. It's probably out. And then later this week, I'm on the Juggernaut, the 10-minute teacher podcast with Vicki Davis. This podcast gets a lot of people listen to this podcast, or at least that's what I was told. And Vicki Davis does a great job, and so I will be. I joked with her that a lot of my answers for one question take 10 minutes. So I don't know how I'm going to be on a 10-minute podcast.
It really be brief.
I'm going to have to be very brief. I don't know if I can do that, but I'm going to have to, it's a new skill. We're all learning, friends. We're all learning, and I'm going to learn how to, can it, I guess, for lack of better words. I wanted to complain a little before we moved on to what's next. I don't know if anyone else is feeling like this. Maybe this is an interesting chat question for OnEducation, for Chat on Education this week. But I'm having a real hard time getting going after Christmas break, like with the bike, with the exercising and the getting into the habits. And you wouldn't believe how many times people ask me, "Hey Mike, how's the book going?" And I'm like, "Yeah, the book's going terrible, but thanks for asking." It's like, no, it's not going well. I haven't done anything on it in like 4 weeks. It's terrible. I'm having a real hard time getting back into the swing of things, and I'm curious, do you have trouble adjusting after being off for a long time, getting even coming back in September? Well, I guess for you guys it's August, but also after Christmas break, because I'm struggling, man, struggling hard.
I would say it comes and goes. I definitely agree with you. Actually, I think the worst for me is after these conferences. So now it's been back-to-back months of conferences with Impact and now this one.
Yeah.
But I'm making a concerted effort starting tomorrow, because it really took me like 2 or 3 days to even just not be a zombie and to get back into the groove of that. But starting tomorrow with going back to work tomorrow and then getting back into, like you just talked about, exercise and those types of things is super important. I was super happy to get out into the sun out in Miami, because I think that also has a big effect. You live up north too, where we just don't get enough sun in our lives during the winter. I think that has something to do with it too. So I get that seasonal affective, those kinds of syndromes and stuff. I believe in that just because of how lethargic we kind of get and drainage of energy, and you just don't see the sun very often, puts you in weird moods. So yeah, no, I could totally see what you're talking about.
I came back from FETC pretty motivated, though. So I've exercised 2 days in a row now, and I think starting tomorrow I'm going to I'll crack open that Google Doc and get my butt going on writing this book and
nice.
getting rolling with that again. It would be nice to get back into the swing of things and really feel like, I'm moving a bunch of this stuff forward, because the podcast is going super well. We will, just for a side note, we'll have a record month in January. We just don't know how big the record month is going to be. It will be our best month ever. It's already, by the time you're listening to it, it'll be our best month ever. So thank you for listening, friends. We're going to absolutely destroy our best month. We just don't know by how much yet. So that's unbelievable as well. So speaking of unbelievable, when we come back, the bests, except for this week, we're switching it up a little, and we're talking about 6 of the worst EdTech debacles of the last decade with our special guest, Audrey Watters. So stay with us.
OnEducation is brought to you by Fidgets. Fidgets are interactive USB sensors that bring your code to life. There's no soldering or wiring required. Simply plug in a Fidget sensor, write code in your favorite language, and watch your ideas come alive. Fidgets are used by thousands of STEM professionals globally and are now available for computer science students. Simply go to bit.ly/Fidgets on Education to get your introductory kit that includes a free sensor worth over $50. That's bit.ly/Fidgets on Education. Welcome back to OnEducation, and welcome to The Bests. Every week, Mike and I take you through a list of our top things, from books to games, from people to ideas.
And this week, we're mixing it up a little bit. This isn't the best. This is the worsts. A decade in review of some of the craziest ideas, controversies, and unfilled promises in EdTech in the 2010s. And we're thrilled to be joined on the worsts today by the great Audrey Watters, whose article, The 100 Worst EdTech Debacles of the Decade, is out now. Welcome to OnEducation, Audrey.
Thank you so much for having me.
First off, this article is amazing in every way. I think it's one of those great articles because there's so much in it that, there's things that people don't agree with. There's people, and you can agree with things super strongly for one thing and disagree strongly with other things. It evoked tons of emotion and passion. I'm sure the feedback that you got was out of control.
The feedback has been wild. It was actually one of those things where I couldn't use Twitter for a while because just the amount of people, strangers talking to me was overwhelming. I got a ton of emails, and some of them were really funny. It's a long piece, and people were some people said I should have said more. I was like, are you kidding? I said plenty. People had additional, here's the 101st, the 102nd.
Sure.
And so it's been overwhelming, but mostly positive.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. How many EdTech CEOs or former CEOs rolled into your DMs?
What's funny is I got a text message from a venture capitalist that I was like, okay, dude, how do you have my number? That's creepy.
They have the numbers.
I guess so. Right. So I haven't, a couple of CEOs, but the venture capitalist actually texting me was a shock.
Unbelievable. And just before we get going, the other thing that was super funny was people complaining that you didn't write a 100 best list. And your responses to that were priceless, to say the least. You don't owe people anything, first off. And it was just the request, the begging, why can't you be more positive, Audrey? And all that nonsense was just stupid, for lack of better words. It's just crazy. What a piece.
Yeah, it is funny. I feel like here we are, many of us, also, I'll speak for myself, I've worked in or adjacent to education technology for over 20 years now. If we still in 2020 need feel-good stories about ed tech, then I feel like we're doing something wrong, right? Either we know that what we're doing is good, but I don't see why I have to validate people's feelings about the careers that they've chosen. I work in ed tech. I mean, I struggle with it too, man. But I'm not your priest. So, yeah.
Amazing. So we have 6. We went through it. We each probably read it at least 5 or 6 times. And I went through it again today just to make sure I was still, so backstory, friends, we've tried to do this for a couple weeks now, and we've had some issues connecting. So we've had this kind of queued up, and people are getting excited to hear it. So we're excited to talk about it. So what we got is 6 items from the list. Glen's grabbed 3 and I grabbed 3, and we're just going to name them off, and then we're going to talk about them a little bit because they're pretty hilarious. So I'm going to start with the first one here, and my first one is actually pretty far down the list. Rich people's kids don't use tech, and other stories about the Silicon Valley elite. And your quote here, I mean, I get this one completely because I think that this is the media just going nuts about wanting to talk about what rich people do and poor people don't. And I mean, it's just another example of them versus us kind of thing. And, they make all of this stuff and then they don't use it. And the other thing I thought of related to this, and maybe you can even speak to this because I think this is related, is that they built all this stuff and they know how addicting it is. And then they decide not to use it because they know that they've made it into something that is even in some cases dangerous. So yeah, number 98, rich people's kids don't use tech. What do you think?
This story always, whenever I see articles like this, and there were plenty of them in the past decade. I think famously the story that Bill Gates didn't let his kids have a cell phone and that Steve Jobs didn't let his have iPads. And those feel like they're anecdotal. I feel like it's, I mean, for one thing, I don't know. I mean, I have to imagine. I think the reasons why many of us give children, even increasingly younger children, a cell phone is so that we can stay in touch with them as a parent in case of emergency. But I'm trying to imagine a scenario where Bill Gates' children are ever alone without security, and bodyguards and nannies and private tutors. And so I just feel like it's just a really different set of circumstances. But yeah, I get really tired. I think towards the end of the decade, we started hearing more and more stories from these executives saying that they recognized that the technology was dangerous and awful, and they wanted to help us understand how to better use it. And to me, that was just sort of grossly offensive. I mean, you put us in this predicament. I just don't trust you one whit to get us out of it. Like, why would we turn to Silicon Valley if we're facing problems with it's how we're using tech too. Like, it's our fault. It's our fault we all spend too much time on Instagram. Yeah, thanks.
It's totally our fault.
One of the ones that caught my eye right away as I was going down the list, and there was a lot of things that caught our eye, we were going down, is this concept of online credit recoveries. Every school that I've been a part of, and this is 20 plus years now into teaching, has had some sort of program, especially here recently, that's associated. And I read down the list of Odyssey-ware and Apex and a whole bunch of other companies that have made a lot of money. A lot of money on the concept of being able to offer a way to recover credits, and really, honestly, to recover credits very quickly. Usually in the evenings or in the summertime, in a 2 or 3 week period, you're covering a whole semester's worth of content. And then, and why would schools ever let this happen? Someone might be asking themselves, like, why are we doing this? And really, you were right on point as far as all of these things about rating schools, A through F, all of some monies are even associated with this as far as graduation rates. And so we want our kids to graduate. So we find ways that people have sold us to be able to kind of backdoor them in to graduation. And we have alternative schools actually here in Minnesota, charter schools, I'll call them, that are 100% set up with these kind of companies. And what kind of diploma are you getting, with these types of, and I've experienced the software itself, and it's not that good. It's pretty horrible, actually. It's not entertaining. It's not good. It's bad. And I found it compelling. I knew we needed to go ahead and talk about it. Can you talk a little bit more about it and what you found as far as this?
Yeah, there was a great series of stories that Slate put out where they investigated. They had, I think, 5 or 6 stories in the series where they investigated these online credit recovery programs. And I think you're right. I mean, I think schools are under a great deal of pressure to improve their graduation rates. And it's understandable that they want to do something. But when the answer is to put students, particularly some of the most vulnerable students, in these courses where they are not getting any human attention often, it really is just, go work in the corner with a digital workbook, really. And at the end, we'll say, okay, that counts. I think it is so indicative of how we fail to invest in people, and instead we talk. And I think that is a theme that runs through so many of these debacles, is that we've decided that we're going to invest in tech and solving our problems, and these are hard problems to solve, right?
Sure.
But we're going to invest in tech and not in people, and instead of the support services that students need for a variety of reasons, students struggle and fail classes and aren't going to graduate on time. But instead of supporting students, we throw them into these classes that are really quite egregious. And actually, one of the companies in this list, I think, was involved with a bribery scandal of an Alabama state legislature. I mean, it's just shady from top to bottom. And I think it's indicative too of the ways in which, I think, back to the earlier example, the ways in which often affluent students have a very different experience of technology than do poor students and students who are struggling. And I think it's really egregious that this is the kind of tech that schools are paying for.
Am I right to suggest that this doesn't seem like something that's going away anytime soon either? Like this is getting worse. Not like it's not like Audrey just called these guys out and it's stopping now. No. This is getting worse, right?
I think that's what's so unfortunate about a lot of these things, and I think that's something, another theme when I say we're not investing in people. I mean that we're not investing. We have decided schools, both at K through 12 and higher ed, have really outsourced a lot of their responsibilities to for-profit companies who are offering these solutions. And, I think that's, unfortunately, that's the way in which many of schools functions. And these are important functions, right? The function of getting a student graduated, sure, but getting them graduated with a quality education is also part of it. And I feel like we're really dropping the ball.
So in the, Glenn and I don't disagree on many things, to be honest. But this one actually is probably in our top 5 list of disagreements, or at least maybe misperceptions of what each other were saying when we were saying them. And we're going to talk about, it's funny just thinking about it. We're going to talk about interactive whiteboards for a minute here.
Yes.
I after ISTE 2018 in Chicago, I might have caused a bit of a, I don't know. I was going to swear there for a second, but a Twitter thread did not go well. where I kind of bashed interactive whiteboards and smartboards pretty hard. And I still, I mean, I guess, so my position, and I think that you kind of talk about this a bit too, is that it's not that I necessarily have a problem with the technology, even though it's incredibly expensive, and you can go buy a 60-inch TV for $500 now and do a lot of what you're doing on a whiteboard, that is $5,000 from Smart. But the fact that they were sold as this thing that was going to revolutionize your classroom, that teachers weren't going to be at the front of the school class anymore, that students were going to be the center of the learning by using the whiteboard, none of that happened. Almost I mean, I can say it pretty, in my experience anyways, and I know there are anecdotal experiences where this happened and it was great. I'm sure I'm going to hear lovely stories about their kids on the whiteboards. Bring it, let's go. But to be honest, I tend to agree that, interactive whiteboards were, one of the EdTech disasters of the last 10 years.
One of my favorites, our favorite arguments that I heard, and I think it was probably also from an ISTE exhibit hall, when the salesperson touted that they were interactive and that students could actually check themselves in attendance in the morning, and that showed Johnny moving their name from absent to present.
And I thought, people who still do this.
Teachers have had mechanisms of Johnny checking into the classroom since the very first school decided to take attendance. I think that, really overselling this idea that technology is creating new opportunities, when really it's actually just selling you a much more expensive way of doing the same old thing. And so for me, I find interactive whiteboards to be pretty uninteresting. I find it really fascinating, though, that one of the reasons why they saw such a decline in popularity was the argument that every student should have their own device. And so, I wonder, I don't know what the difference is between what school districts are spending, to be honest, getting a big white screen in front of the room, or, 35 little screens in front of each student. So I don't know if the money, I don't know what's more expensive.
What I was going to say too, Audrey, is we were just at the FETC conference, and one of the main sponsors of the entire conference was Promethean. So Promethean whiteboards, as you put there, it's still a humongous business even till today. And we have tons of schools that have shifted, like you just said, to one-to-one devices. Who knows if that's actually a better practice? My argument with Mike was basically 10 years ago, when these came into our classrooms, we didn't know what 10 years would end up happening and bringing, which is good that we have this article here to tell us, hey, look at all this stuff that actually happened. But that there's a bunch of teachers who did try to do the best that they could with those things. And those were district purchases. Those weren't teacher purchases that were made. Right. Those were district purchases that were made in an investment. I don't know if that was, like you just said, should we have just invested in those monies into people? Yeah. Probably. That's a lot of the things on this list is should we just invest in people? A
truckload of superintendents got sold hard, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that I'm always fascinated by, by these things that seem to sweep across district decision making. And because I think that it is important to recognize how much of this is really outside of a classroom teacher's hands, what you end up with. I think the other piece of it is that these companies, often they come with and I think the same is true for iPads too, but they come with a certain set of software, a proprietary software on them too. And so your hands are really tied, whether you have a big screen or a little screen. Your hands are often really tied with the software the software that comes on it. And so this idea of revolution, not really.
So I think we should go out to the next one, because I think it's one of the most controversial things on this list. I think it's going to be one of those things that's going to blow up the internet, which I'm so happy to do right now. and what it is, it's actually number 6 on the list. And it says everyone should learn to code.
Oh, yeah.
And Mike and I have had all kinds of discussions about this. Mike being a computer science teacher, an advocate of coding, and I was just questioning a bunch of different things just to be the devil's advocate, and we've been sold this concept. And I was listening actually to a recommendation by you, Mike, to Andrew Yang, as far as I was listening to him speak about coding and kind of this concept of everyone learning the code, and even shifting of job professions to coders. Do you know what I mean? This myth that's being sold out there that we're going to have truck drivers that are going to be retrained and they're going to become a coder, and they're still going to be able to, live the great life, American dream, or whatever it might be. And his argument, Andrew Yang, is like, this is not, first of all, there's not that many jobs of those. Second of all, that's not those people's, we don't know if that's their passion and want to go in and do those kind of things. Third of all, we don't know if we can just train somebody to just drop in and be a professional coder. It's not just that, that easy. And anyway, as far as schools are concerned, we were told there's a massive skills gap. Too few people have studied science, technology, engineering, or math, and employers can't find these skilled workers in these fields. So teaching everyone to code is somehow going to move people into these professions, and then suddenly get the USA back on top, or Canada back up on top as far as, in this profession itself. So I thought it was a great topic to at least have a conversation and really to ask you questions, just your thoughts more than anything else.
I think one of the things that I find so fascinating when you hear something like STEM suddenly become such a priority. And I actually learned this year that before it was STEM, it was SMET, science, math, engineering, and technology.
But I guess they thought
STEM was better. But that's a strange set of disciplines to wrap together. And there's a pretty interesting history about how that kind of came to be. And I think that it's important and also to connect to it too, is that in order to get a visa, the H-1B visa that a lot of tech companies use, there's actually priorities for STEM, and certain fields have actually renamed themselves. Certain schools, certain departments have renamed themselves in order to become more STEM. So, for example, economics departments economics is not listed by Homeland Security as a STEM field, whereas econometrics is STEM. And so several universities have renamed their department econometrics because they're able to get more money and able to get more visas for students. And so it's hard to see some of this stuff as just, I think this stuff is deeply political, and it's generated by a lot of industry influence. And I think it's always important whenever we hear these kinds of narratives to stop and think sort of who's behind them, who's funding them. And I think the Everyone Learn to Code, the code.org push is really an industry push. And I think I'm not sure that sort of the coding stuff is it's not that it's a superfluous skill. I mean, there's lots of.
I was going to say, is this really a bad thing, though? Teaching kids to code.
So I think the problem is that the problem we already have a problem with curriculum. right? It's hard, like something's got to go, right? Mm-hmm. And we've already decided, I guess, when we decided to prioritize standardized testing in English or in language and math, that art was going to go and that music was going to go and that in some places, you know, PE is going to go. And I worry that you know, what do we get rid of in order to spend more time with coding?
Yeah.
And you were saying, Audrey, too, I want you to expand upon this. What do you, to what end are these companies pushing the coding? What do you think? I mean, as far as that, because you said something is behind this kind of movement, the concepts, and then the code.org. And I mean, everybody's got free coding sites of some sort or another. What do you think that, you know, if we were going to say, okay,
we're following the money, where's the money going?
Yeah. Like what's to what purpose? Cause I actually would like to, you know, hear your idea.
I think that it is an effort. I think it is really a powerful effort to kind of reshape what curriculum looks like. And I think, again, I know that maybe I don't know. I believe it was in Alberta, for example. The oil industry really worked hard to reshape what the curriculum looked like for environmental studies. And I think we would look at that and be like, oh, hell no, I'm sorry. Why should the oil industry get to tell us what we teach in the environmental studies classes? That seems like a bad idea. Mm-hmm. And yes. I think that having industry tell schools what the curriculum looks like is not a good idea. I think that particularly for democracy, and I think that these companies' vision of what coding looks like is very branded. It might be really different than what we might think of as a sort of non-branded, non-industry supported introduction to computer science or introduction to computational thinking. But once Google decides that it's gonna give the lay down the outline of what the curriculum looks like, you can bet you're not going to be learning things that, for example, Microsoft is interested in its programmers learning. So you kind of see the divisions there between, Apple's really interested in people learning Swift, for example, so that you can build an iPhone app. I think that's really different than giving people foundational knowledge that they can move from programming language to programming language or have a working understanding, broadly speaking, of computing. And I think
it's funny, actually.
Oh, go ahead.
It's funny that you mentioned stuff like that because Google created this whole digital citizenship curriculum in the last year and a half or 2 years. And there's not a whole lot in it about like the ethics of advertising and the ethics of search and
data
like where your personal data is going, when you do Google searches and like what when you say okay, Google to something, what's being recorded. There's not
the role of YouTube and the downfall
those
of
are
democracy.
like critical digital citizenship conversations that aren't being had in a curriculum that is otherwise very good. And I think teachers, including like I've used that curriculum, but now that I reflect on it, I'm like, they purposely omitted some stuff, or at least didn't like get into it because that's them they would be talking about, right? So I think you're bang on about stuff like this.
Right. I think that, and I'm glad that you brought up the Google, the digital citizenship curriculum of Google too, because I think that it is incredibly important that we better equip students to navigate this information society. Right. And I'm not sure that knowing to code is is the key to that. I mean, for one thing, I know a lot of computer programmers who are as ready to share fake news on Twitter as, people in other fields. I'm not sure that being a computer programmer sort of equips you to be to sort of read and understand the way in which information works today. And I think that to me would be what I think is the priority. And certainly you're never going to see Google offering good lessons on that, because they're absolutely implicated. Same for Facebook, they're absolutely implicated in the sort of mess that we found ourselves in.
I saw a Facebook education website the other day, and I was like, what's Facebook going to say to me that I can take seriously?
I heard a person from Facebook Education once say, and I think that they were riffing off the Apple thing, Apple says education is the core of our DNA. And Facebook said, the Facebook education person said that Facebook is what was it that they said? Facebook is the core, the founding moment of Facebook was about education. And I thought, just because you were built in a Harvard dorm room does not mean that the foundational moment of your company was educational.
I don't think Facebook should be teaching us digital citizenship lessons. Like, let's steer clear, friends.
Yes.
Not happening. Oh my God. I saw that website and I'm like, what? I didn't even know this was a thing, and I'm glad I don't, but I can't wait till they try to do something so we can tell them where to take it.
The other thing, sorry, just to add on everyone should learn to code, is I think that, it's not something that I feel as though we need to do a much better job globally thinking about not how to prepare kids for the jobs of the future, which is this weird thing that you hear people from the World Bank talking about. But I think we need to think about what the world looks like with climate change. And again, I'm not sure that we can sort of gadget our way or JavaScript our way into a better environment for the planet. And I think that we should need bigger thinking than everybody should learn to code.
Interesting. I love this term, this Uber for education term. It's gross on a couple levels, but I'm actually what got me thinking about this one was it's almost like a bingo card, and I want to start a bingo card on who's going to say it next. And like where's it going to come from next? I feel like there's a room in the market, and only because I've been part of conversations about it, about and this is actually a legit, a moderately legit comparison, or at least the analogy holds up, and that's someone doing basically a teachers pay teachers competitor but free. And the only thing stopping that from legitimately happening well is monetization. It seems like Amazon tried it. I think that's actually one of your things.
Yeah.
Is Amazon trying to distribute free resources? But like you could, like some executive that starts this is going to be like, we're the Uber of education because we're crowdsourced, blah, 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 blah. It's actually not playing very well anymore because of the problems at Uber either, right? So,
right.
This kind of fails on a couple of levels, right?
It's so funny that when you sort of can tell, I think sometimes that Silicon Valley executives and certain members of the president's cabinet are grossly out of touch with reality when they do use phrases like Uber for education. Because I think that most of us have learned a long time ago that Uber was built on predatory practices. And I think it's very difficult today to say that this is a good idea. And to me, the part that always really burns me about this too was that when Uber then in turn turned around and said, we're the Uber for education because we have so many teachers working for us, driving for us, which
so
makes me want to poke my eyeballs out.
Yeah. It's we talk a lot about I live in Ontario, and teachers get paid a lot up here, and and then in like Louisiana, you can work for 15 years as a teacher and make $30,000 a year. It's, I mean, the inequities of teacher pay are just mind-blowing to me and my family. My wife's a teacher as well. And so the idea of teachers being Uber drivers makes my blood boil. It's awful. And so to analogize anything with Uber right now is probably not cool, right?
Hopefully not. I mean,
yeah.
We talked about coding, and that's a hot topic, but this one is even hotter, I think, because I know tons of teachers, including the teachers in my district and the previous districts that I've ever worked at, that heavily use Google for Education. And actually, Google for Education was one of the biggest vendors, again, at the FETC conference, and is at ISTE, and it's humongous. And there's books about Google for Education and so on and so forth. And you write here, but at what cost comes free? And basically the concept of what is Google doing with all of that student data that it's actually acquiring? We're just giving it up to them freely. And what can we actually do about it? Because we're heavily dependent on it now. I mean, we're living in this ecosystem. All of us that live within this Google ecosystem, we do everything inside of it, and it's free. And you said, but at what cost comes free? So it's really crazy how we've just said, well, they can't really do anything that bad with this stuff. Talk to us more about that.
It is amazing to me how it's amazing to me how beloved Google is. I hear people invoking all sorts of things to sort of, we'll be more like Google. We'll give students 20% time. And I'm like, well, you know who does not give people 20% time any longer and hasn't since like 2011? Google. Or people say, at Google, they don't look at your transcripts, and it's like, well, no shit. They just only hire people who go to Stanford. I mean, I think
it's pretty easy. You graduated from Stanford. I actually know who you are. Come work for us.
They actually,
you just got to go across the water.
They have a class in the CS department at Stanford that teaches you how to do well in the Google interview. Right. So that symbiotic relationship, again, between education and industry, that's worth our thinking about. Who are we working for here? I believe that education should work for the public, right? Not for a particular corporation. Google is, I think, I haven't looked at the statistics recently, but Google is certainly one of the companies that spends the most in Washington, D.C. lobbying to get its way. And certainly the way what Google wants are regulations or sort of little to no regulations on the use of data. Under the Obama administration, there were a couple of rewrites to some of the privacy legislation that deals with students and children's data. And they were really softened to make the case, to make it sort of easier for companies to be able to sort of say that they work for the school, therefore the data is rightfully theirs without any kind of consent or notification. How do we disentangle ourselves from Google is a really, really, really hard question. And I think that particularly once your district has made a decision that we're not going to spend money running the email server anymore, right? We're going to outsource that to a company, and it's free. It's really hard to claw that back and say, actually, we need to put this line item back in the budget because we're gravely concerned about not just what's happening to student data, but how Google is not a good steward for what I said earlier, for the sort of information that they, their mission is supposedly organize the world's information and make it useful. That's ridiculous. Their mission is to organize the world's information so that we click on ads.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
That's the ultimate right there. That is.
That's it.
I was just thinking about how entangled we are. You just said email. We are.
Yeah.
Very entangled there. We have unlimited drive space as educators. It's one of their perks. You can actually put as much as you want into a Google Drive folder or, whatever might be storage, unlimited amounts. So we're all we're basically addicted to this free service, and we're willing to give up, this precious information, from students who are not even of age. We're giving them their information. So it's crazy. And like you said, I don't know what's the out on that. And I don't know what could be the end result of having done that.
Yeah.
Audrey,
yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, this is the thing with so much of this too. And this is again back to one of your first points. So I was so reluctant to sort of come up with a list of great things about ed tech is we have put ourselves in a position where we have so much work to do to fix the mess we made. And I think in almost all these cases, with some exceptions, we thought we had the best of intentions, right? We thought we were being innovative. We thought we were adopting these products because they would make school cheaper, faster, more efficient. Students would be smarter. And really what we've done is we've exposed students' personal data. We've completely hijacked what the computer industry has hijacked knowledge. And it's a mess. It's a mess.
Well, on that positive note, this is called the worsts for a reason, friends. It is what it is. This is what we're here for. Audrey, thank you so much for joining us on this special episode of The Bests that we're now calling the worst. We're going to link the full article in the show notes. Can you share with everyone where they can go to connect with you or to read your work?
Yes. You can find me on my blog, Hack Education, which is hackeducation.com. I'm also on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @Audrey Watters, 2 T's. Although I shouldn't be on Twitter because I'm working on finishing a book, which should be out next year from MIT Press.
Oh, we'd love to have you back on. Once you
I was just going to say, I hope it's not another 10 years when I come back to review
the next decade.
Absolutely not.
So audience, you can always come back to this segment of The Bests by checking out our blog at OnEducationPodcast.com or watching it on YouTube. By Google. Just search for OnEducation and check out the playlist. Want to support us on OnEducation? Check out the Patreon site at patreon.com/OnEducation. Thank you, Audrey.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to On Education. My name is Glen Irvin. My co-host is Mike Washburn. On Education is part of the On Podcast Media Network. You can listen to this show and many others by great educators like Monica Burns, Mike Matera, Tisha Richmond, and many more by visiting onpodcastmedia.com. Want to get in touch with us? Check out our website at oneducationpodcast.com. You can tweet us at oneducationpod. Mike is at Mr. Washburn on Twitter, and I can be found on Twitter at IrvSpanish. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/oneducationpod. We're also on Instagram at oneducationpod. Want to support On Education? Visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/oneducation. There, you can get access to full videos of the podcast and so much more. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we would be thrilled if you shared it with them. Please leave us a rating or a review in Apple Podcasts or the Google Play Store. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost. It helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Classcraft, for supporting us. Check out classcraft.com/oneducation to learn more about them. Thanks as always for listening. Stay awesome and see you soon.